Kevin, thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Do you want to just start by giving us a little bit of background as to what your business actually does in simple terms?
Yeah, so Arkose Labs that I started in Australia, we are a security solution, and our job is to prevent bad people from making money. So simply put, our goal is to make it cost more to attack our customers and the profit motives for our adversaries. And if you do that, they stop attacking people. So that works quite well.
Yep. So this is cyber criminals, right? This is what we're talking
Right.
about here.
That's correct.
Yeah.
On the internet. So we protect all the large social media companies, all the big video game companies who work with the big banks, all of those accounts that we all have online. Our job was to protect those accounts from criminals trying to break into them or create accounts and make money from them that way.
Yeah. And I will get into the sort of your business journey and your leadership style and all that sort of stuff. But I do want to start with the dealing with cybercrime. How difficult has that become over the years? Because
It's a
surely it's advanced a lot.
it's a good business to be in, I would say, protecting against criminals
Yeah.
because it's an increasing business every year, I would say. I think every year the irony is, we're kind of talking building businesses and things here. The irony is I think the best entrepreneurs or some of the better entrepreneurs in the world are actually the criminals that figure out
Yeah.
these such creative ways of making money. It kind of, to me, every year we see like new ways and we're just like, wow, that's genius.
Yeah.
The wrong application of the genius, but still you kind of can see the spark of entrepreneurialism in all these people that are working day in and day out for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
But they're building very legitimate business enterprises from committing all these kind of acts online.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're not constrained by the same legal and moral issues that everyone else in business is constrained by, right? So, I mean,
Right.
all of a sudden, you've opened up your market to a whole range of other ways of doing business. So, what you're saying makes complete sense, even if it's a little troubling.
Yep.
And from a business perspective, were you always going to be run a business, build a business, or what was your sort of when you were younger? What was your sort of your passion?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm an engineer by trade. I'm a big gamer, a bit of a nerd, all that kind of stuff. I actually studied game design at QUT. Um, but I didn't really intend to build a company going into university in Australia. Like it was kind of like I'd go work at a tech company somewhere. That would be cool, I guess, one day. Um, my parents always had their own businesses, and my dad always shared kind of like how he was running his company. Much smaller company that they're doing like car sales, caravan rentals, caravan sales, these things. Very successful entrepreneurs in their own right. Very different kind of scales, like tech
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. But I've always, I guess, had that in the family of people kind of being like, yeah, you should, think about starting your own computer shop, sell computers or something like that. So I've always kind of been supported, I guess, through that lens, but I didn't necessarily think I would do what I've done, that's for sure.
Yeah. So you've been so business entrepreneurialism, that was part of how your family operated. So that
Right.
was probably to a degree second nature. In terms of the scale the business has got to, and some of that information is probably private, but it's a large organization now, right? And that's probably, like you said, surpassed your initial expectations at least. Tell us about that part of the
Absolutely.
journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at the very beginning, like we weren't business people. We had no idea. We saw a tech problem, a user experience issue, and we're like, hey, we can probably do something better than that. But literally no understanding on the business world, no idea of how important this was. Didn't start the company through that lens at all. It was really through the lens of, hey, we think we can build some better tech here. Wouldn't it be cool
Yeah.
if, we sold it for like $10 million or something one day? Obviously, the business is worth dramatically more than that now, and
Yeah.
growing constantly. And the nice thing about where we are right now is we have such a clear line of sight to where we want to go with the company, like the next horizon. Continuing to build this business out and further, compared to where we were when we started the company like 7-ish years ago, whenever it was. It's pretty amazing. You kind of, when you start a company, you have no idea how to even get to like 6 months in, and then like you're 6 months in, you're like, okay, I still don't know how to get to a year in. And then now when you kind of get to the later stage, more stability, obviously, product market fit, those kind of things behind you, it kind of gets easier. I actually prefer this phase than the
Right.
early phase. I don't want to go start another company tomorrow. I'm very happy knowing where we're going
Yeah.
and building this one. This is great.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I mean, but I get what you're saying, that there's the initial hard yards. Doesn't mean the rest
True.
of the yards aren't hard, but those initial hard yards are quite difficult. You're still figuring everything out, whereas
Well,
presumably
there,
you figured some of those things out now.
yeah, well, that's right. It's either it works or it doesn't work. Like the early phase of like, we worked for years, it felt like, before we really had any semblance of what you would deem kind of product market fit, like a repeatable, like, yeah, if I pitch it this way, people are like, oh, that makes sense. I have that problem too. We didn't really even get that in earnest until I moved to the US. I moved here about 5 years ago. First couple of years we were trying to do from Australia, and that was really hard because we're selling into an industry where the biggest companies are the ones that really feel this pain the most because they got the most users to protect and these kind of things. So it's actually easier to sell to them than it is to sell to companies, say in Australia, where it's in general, it's actually quite hard to sell as a startup into Australia. Never mind being an Australian startup in Australia, that's very difficult.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of that move, when did you realize that you had product market fit that you talk about? So it obviously took a long time or longer time than you expected. What was that sort of aha moment?
I think we had a view on product market fit. I don't know if we truly had it when we thought we might have had it, but we had it shortly thereafter. But um, so about 18 months into running the company, we were still trying to figure out the business model. Like our competition was giving away their product for free. It's a small company
Mm.
called Google that didn't help us. But
Yeah,
it's progressed better now. Now Google don't like us. Anytime they come up against us, they're like, okay, we lost that already. They actually know us quite well. I'm sure someone from Google's
right.
listening. Hi, folks. So it's quite interesting. In the early years, we kind of figured out our business model with the help of some of our really first customers. Like one of the really pioneering customers for why Arkose is where we are today is a company, a chat app called Kick. It was a Canadian
Yeah,
company in Waterloo. They've since now sold that business to another company, but we worked very closely with them to protect their user base. Very large app at the time. So this was a product that used to have basically half of like the US app usage for chat back then. So it was really popular back in its heyday. I think it's still used quite a fair bit now. I'm not sure. There's a lot of competition now, a very different market.
yeah, yeah. I
Years
remember
on.
when it came out, actually, my kids at the time, it was the new thing for the teens were doing it and they all sort of got into it and then left it. Now that it was Snapchat and TikTok since then.
Snapchat
So,
and
but yeah,
TikTok
I
and
remember it.
it's all fragmented now because you got Instagram, you got all these
Yeah.
different ones, right? And we're fortunate to work with most of those as well now. So we've kind of come full circle. It feels like with early starting with social media, and now we continue to work with all the large social media platforms, which is a lot of fun because
Yeah,
they're
okay.
very attacked. There's a lot of value in going after large user bases. You can do all kinds of scams and schemes. So
Yeah.
very interesting companies to protect. But yeah, we work with them on our kind of original construct. I remember flying. I remember the original contract with them. I think it was like a $20,000 a year contract, and it was a lot of work. We had kind of two business models at the time. One was like an ad-supported revenue business, and then there was like this direct revenue business. And we're like, I don't know, can we charge people for our product? Because our competition was not. It was a free product we're competing with. So we're trying to do like an
Mhm.
ad-supported thing as like a way of keeping it free. That was
Yep.
the original kind of path we went down, thinking that was the way we had to do it. Um, Turns out people are willing to pay for far superior products, even if the competition is free and is by Google. And this company
Yeah,
really helped us
interesting.
figure that out. My first international trip for the company was flying to Waterloo to meet their team and discuss, hey, maybe we can do more. Maybe I could come home with a $60,000 contract. Wouldn't that be nice? $60,000 a year. We were like sub 100K back then in revenue or something. And I met the team. They were very happy with everything we'd done for them. We'd done a fantastic job. All their metrics just looked incredible. It was all data driven in terms of like they put us in. Look, from here you can see all the abusers. Then you put in Arkose and like all the attacks basically be mitigated. And it's been that way for several months. They were very happy with things. Ended up leaving there with a contract worth $120,000, and we had no idea that it was
Nice.
even possible to get. Like, we put together two tiers, hoping they'd pick the middle tier, but they actually went with the higher tier. They said, "Hey, what else could you do for us?" And it ended up growing almost 3x that within like 6 months. So grew to
Wow.
almost over $250,000. And that was all USD. The Australian dollar, as you know, is atrocious, which is fantastic to be collecting USD most of the time. So that was a nice boon to us. And that kind of helps solidify. We had some other early customer wins. So Electronic Arts was actually another very early customer for us. So
Okay.
Kick and EA were like our first two real customers.
Right.
EA's contract started smallish as well. We kind of grew that. They're still both customers of ours today. And then we got a few other wins on the board. So companies like Dropbox and GitHub and a number of other. These are all big brands, obviously, but they also are the ones that kind of saw the value of solving this and were willing to work with the startup that had a pretty compelling product pitch. There's a very technical product won customers. Like this was not marketing and sales. This was me going and talking to a bunch of technology people as the engineer that was also writing the thing when I got back. And that was kind of like our early couple of wins. I would fly to the US monthly. I did that for about a year. And before I got to the point where we had both collected enough logos to make it make sense that like, hey, actually, I'm going to spend more time in the US. Like this is where it's working. We kind of figured out an approach. But also, I think at the time we were actually break even technically. So we only had like 7 or 8 employees at that time, but we were break even on those deals. And then the intent was to go to the US and obviously do it a bit more seriously with you know, the venture capital game and all that fun stuff.
At what point did the venture capital come into it? Is obviously you're getting revenue in the early days, and you started to work that out. Obviously, the VC side helps you scale, but how did that work for you guys?
Yeah, so it's when I came to the US, I moved here September 2017, 2018. I don't know. It was might have been 2017. Is it 6 years ago? Just under 6 years ago, something like that. And we didn't know anyone here. So I was like in San Francisco. So I moved to San Francisco because like if you're gonna move anywhere in the US and you're doing a tech thing, we already had some early customers here. We're like, okay, the logical place to go is to SF. Like all of these companies we could potentially work with are in SF. So came to SF, but didn't know anyone. So I was like, okay, now what do we do? And it was just me. We still had the rest of the team were back in Australia. So we kept things very, very, very lean, obviously, at the time. And we were invited by the, I think it was Oztrade, you know, this kind of the landing pad over here in San Francisco. They recommended we join an accelerator, which was Alchemist Accelerator, which is an enterprise SaaS focused accelerator. So if you have a business that sells to enterprise and you're a SaaS product, they're purpose built for you to kind of join them as an accelerator versus like Y Combinator, which is more like anything can kind of enter Y Com if it's potentially a big business. But there's like a lot of overlap in terms of advisors between them and stuff like that. So you kind of get the same caliber. And this is before COVID. So back when, you know, people used to go to offices and stuff, it was fantastic.
The good old days.
I don't know how accelerators work. They're probably better now, but I'm guessing they're more remote now than they used to be. But anyway, so we decided to join the accelerator. Initially, we were a bit skeptical because we're like, we're already at like 300,000-400,000 ARR, which, you know, that's pretty good. Like when you join an accelerator, these are people that have like nothing. They don't even have ideas sometimes. They're trying to like find a co-founder. So we were pretty late, I would say, to join an accelerator. But the owner of Alchemist, I remember talking to him. I was at a conference in New York. I remember we won actually GitHub at that conference. I remember now. I was talking to him on, I don't know, one of the rooms, I guess. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think this makes a lot of sense. You're asking for a lot of equity. It's like, I'm not going to disclose the terms, but high equity ask considering we've already got revenue on these kind of things. We had some angel funding from Australia. We can probably talk about that in a moment, but we had some angel funding from folks in Australia, but we hadn't done like a Series A or any institutional capital yet. And he said, look, treat us like an advisor, and how much equity would be fair for an advisor, and come to the program. We want to have some more later stage businesses also kind of join and be part of it. I'm like, okay, so an advisor, I'd probably give, I don't know, whatever percentage you'd give to an advisor as an early stage. And he was like, all right, fine, we'll do that as an experiment. And he let us in, join the program. The biggest benefit I found from the program wasn't the classes, because again, they were focused on things that were just too early for us. Like it was very early, which was great for most of the attendees, wasn't quite for the stage we're at. It was actually access to the mentors and coaches. So I was the only person kind of pitching this product as an engineer turned somewhat sales guy, I guess. Originally, I had
Yeah.
no idea how to pitch things. I had no idea how to put compelling contracts. All this stuff was way over my head at the time. And I got access to a sales coach. That's what I really wanted. I wanted someone to help me
Right.
figure out the sales process. Like, how do you sell something repeatedly? How do I pitch to people? How do I, all that kind of stuff. And I got a Dan Kaplan, fantastic advisor, very, very awesome at like being overly fair with his time. I was supposed to meet with him like once every 3 weeks or something, and he would meet with me daily.
Mhm.
He would come in and
Oh,
we'd go
wow.
through the deck and we'd talk about it. I'd record sales calls. He would listen to them with me. We'd think about different ways we could position stuff. So he really kind of helped me figure out the machine really in a pretty quick time frame. Like, we were really working hard, probably over 8 to 12 weeks. And at the end of that process, I was like, I'm ready to hire a sales guy. I kind of get this now. Like, I've got kind of a potential
Okay.
process here. And yeah, then obviously the journey of your first sales team and what I've learned and done well and not done well and all kinds of the whole journey of that. But I think founder-led sales, you kind of are doing until you're like 5. I mean, even now I spend a lot of time helping the sales team, but it's very much a supporting role now. It used to be like I was the guy for the first
Yeah.
5, maybe 10 million. I pretty much
Yep.
led that hands-on. And I think all founders of early stage companies, tech or otherwise, will learn that that's actually the most important job. You can hire people to build technology. You can't hire people so easily to evangelize why that
Yeah.
thing is important and how it works to very technical people. I think that's a bit of a secret of founders that are technical, is you can do that better than anybody.
Yeah. And no one understands it like the founder, right? The founders are usually of varying degrees of confidence or ability when it comes to the sales part, but no one knows it like the founder. And so once you can harness that side of things and work out, like you say, work out your process and all that type of thing, you're away.
Yeah, I think the other benefit of a tech founder leading sales or being very like early on in the sale, tech
Yeah.
people hate selling stuff, by the way. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you naturally have a aversion against doing it. I don't consider it selling. I love evangelizing. I love talking about the problems. I know our product works, so I'm very passionate about that. Like, they're the reasons why people have had confidence to buy from us, is because they can see that we know what we're talking about. We've had those early customer wins. The really first early customers, they were the hardest ones, obviously, to convince. Kick actually came to us. They found us they reached out to us and said, "Hey, we have this problem." Ironically, it was Google's product. They were using it. It's like, it's not really working. It's not
Right.
stopping anything. So we appreciate you, Google. You've helped us start our company as well, as all good companies do, I guess. We're one of the tendrils that came from anyway. And yeah, really from there, it was just evangelizing the great work that our team had been doing, and kind of how the technology worked and how thoughtful we were to solving very specific pain points of this kind of technology. I think people really appreciated how deep in the weeds. I remember going, I think it was Electronic Arts, invited us up to integrate our technology into some of their flagship properties. And big security team. So I flew up to Vancouver by myself, because I was like, I can't really take anyone with me, because I know they're not going to really know how to like present to these folks. And I've
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
bit of
Yeah.
practice at this point. And I remember they had about 30 people or something on their side. It was this huge conference room they invited me
Wow.
into, and they're like, "So you're going to come present this this product to us?" I was like, "Where's your team?" I was like, "Oh, it's just me." Like, "Okay, all right." So they had all these people come in to obviously pick it apart, figure out, is this going to be any good? Is it going to work or not? And they were awesome. So tech, I love working with and partnering with technologists, because they really get it. Like, when
Mm.
they come in very skeptical, but they become your best evangelists once you
Yeah.
convince them. Like, they truly appreciate and understand it. So I just love the technology sell. Anytime I meet someone that's a technologist in a position of like making impactful decisions at these big companies, a lot of our customers are the big tech companies, because they're very tech driven. Like, it's about the data, it's about the
Yeah.
results, it's about how does the tech work, does it fundamentally make sense. It's not smoke and mirrors. We actually have a warranty on our product. We're the only company in the security space in our field that has a warranty certifying that it will do its
Yeah.
job, otherwise cover losses. No one else has that in our space.
Yeah, I read
And
that. That was interesting. Yeah.
I came up with that idea walking around Black Hat 7, 8 years ago. Everyone's vendors, all the vendors booths say the same thing. You've got no way of knowing, like it's just so much BS. And then every year, half of those vendors cease existing. So like that's how noisy and bad it is in security space. So the original objective behind the warranty, which we only finally launched last year, and we launched a second warranty this year, and we got more coming on our product, was to stand out from all the people that are saying, yeah, our product's just as good as Arkose. It's like, well, okay, well, we're backed by insurance carriers. Well, what about you? You've got nothing? Oh, okay. Most of security is best efforts. Like you don't get a contract certifying it will actually stop threats.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, okay. That's interesting, isn't it? But I'll just go back to that sales side of things. You're quite right in terms of sales really is just solving somebody's problem. And if you can look at it that way, it becomes a far easier process and a far easier conversation to have, because all you have to do is find people who have that problem, and then you can explain how it's solved. They'll buy after that. That's I'm oversimplifying, but it's
on paper it's so easy. Yeah, it's so easy. I think engineers certainly can be trained. Like I've obviously learned over the years. I'm pretty good at presenting compelling reasons and asking the right questions. It initially it was very much, here's my product, here's why it's great. That was kind of my pitch. And I was like, I kind of work with certain people, but it didn't work with a lot of people. And the right kind of pitch is like, what's your problem? Like, how are they getting in? What are you currently using? What would success look like? Some of these things. That was kind of the second phase. Like when I started getting sales coaching, you kind of figure out better ways of phrasing questions and learning and listening more than speaking.
I was going to say most of it is listening, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I still like talking about how great our customers are and what we've done. That's worked pretty well for us. Even now, it still works pretty well. But yeah, listening's an important part of it, I would say. I have a much bigger team now. They can go do the listening first, and then they can bring me in when it's time to do the talking. So it's
Fair
you
enough.
can pick,
That sounds like a
pick
good.
the pieces you enjoy the most, I guess, as you get further along.
Yeah, sounds like it's working. As a leader, how have you evolved over the journey so far? And it was only a short journey, I guess. Really, you're talking about sort of 7, 8 years from when
That's
you
nothing.
started to now. Yeah, but how you must have. There's obviously a steep learning curve as you progress. How have you evolved as a leader?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think both myself, the company, our customers, the team, we've all evolved along the same way. I think the reason why I've been successful is actually because I do take guidance fairly well, I would say, from people that should be a lot better at this than I am when it comes to building a company and these kind of things. But I've been very fortunate. You know, one of our very early investors, a gentleman called Richard Moore, one of our first board members, actually, you know, really being pretty active in coaching and guiding and giving just mentorship and kind of being willing to spend the time with me talking about basically anything. I even remember like one of our first lawyers. I remember talking to him like every other couple of weeks and just asking him questions about like how do you structure things, like how do you do this, like we got these deals, how do we sign it, like what contracts, like how do we put that stuff together. It was a lot of asking questions and learning. Like just the stuff I've learned is just completely,
Yeah,
it feels incredibly arcane, but also incredibly critical to building a company. But like I don't see how you learn this stuff. Like an individual person starting a company with no prior knowledge in running a company, there's just no way you know how to do that. Like you're never gonna, and you can't really learn as you go per se. Like you got to be taught as you go. So like you can learn from people, but you can't learn by doing it yourself. Like it's really important to find people that'll coach you along the way. Otherwise, I think you'd fail very quickly. I think that's probably one of the
yeah,
bigger reasons people do fail is because they don't have people helping guide them to success.
yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense. You look at where you started and the culture of the business that you've got. Does the type of industry you're in change the culture from what might be a culture of a business in a standard tech startup company versus something that seems a little more serious? I mean, I'm stereotyping here, and I don't necessarily know, so correct me if I'm wrong. But doing what you do is a serious business, right? So does that change the culture of the business?
I hope we're not too serious. Maybe we are serious. I mean, we definitely we definitely have like financial crime kind of customers, and we have like
Yeah.
customers where it could lead to bad things, and we're protecting use cases where child trafficking is ultimately funded by the money that we're stopping being collected. So yes, there is
Right.
absolutely a serious component to the work. We
Yeah.
also protect the largest video game companies in the world. We're venture
Yeah.
backed by Sony. PlayStation use us, so we also get to work with like video game companies and tech companies. So I think we really kind of cover the spectrum because we just have such a
Yeah.
broad
Okay.
customer base. And we have the people that like gaming, work with our gaming customers, and they're like, this is the bestest thing in the world. Like, we're protecting all the big game titles so we can see the traffic spikes when the new game launches, and we're kind of part of that experience. And that's
Yeah.
really cool. But I think from a culture standpoint, yeah, I'm not a serious kind of person. Like, it's not me. So like that can't be the company's culture. If you're not having fun, and it's
Yeah.
hard, like it's a lot of work. And the
Yeah.
attitude for me is very much we'll figure out a way regardless kind of thing. And we always do. Like, I've seen us figure out the way so many times. I know we'll keep figuring out the way, even if we've got new people in there like, that's a big ask, Kevin. Are you sure you can do it? I was like, well, yeah, you can't do it with that attitude. You can do it with the right attitude, though. You can figure it out.
Yeah.
So no, I think culturally, it's it's like any other tech company. I would say I don't think there's anything about our use case that makes
Yeah.
us hire more serious
That
people. We
doesn't
have
change things.
we expect very high expectations. We work at big banks. We have compliance through the wazoo, all this kind of stuff we got to deal with. But that doesn't mean
Yeah.
work has to be miserable either, right?
Yeah. Do you think you set the tone for that in the early days and continue to do that? Does that come from the founder?
Yeah, I think it comes from like we have a few different regions. So we have obviously our team back in Brisbane, Queensland, and Australia, where I
Yep.
started the company. We have obviously our team here in the Bay Area. Our third largest office is actually in Costa Rica, and they have
Okay.
a fantastic culture. And I wasn't really even part of building that culture, to be honest, because
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
a different location. They're just really cool people. Our customers love working with them. I think they're great. I love visiting them. We have obviously people, globally, remotely, that, as we all know, with COVID being what it is, but our kind of business, it's a 24/7 follow the sun kind of business. Like, we don't,
Right.
turn it off on the weekend. So we have employees that work weekend shifts, like they're actual dedicated employees for weekend coverage and stuff like that. So we have true 24/7 follow the sun. We have people in Barcelona, we have people in Argentina, we have a team in India, all that kind of stuff, right? So
Okay.
I think a bit of the tone is absolutely set. Like, we try not to be too serious. I think a large chunk of the tone is really dependent on the employees. They really set their own
Mm.
culture in many ways. Like, we try and enable and steer by removing people that we feel are detractive to
Yep.
genuinely nice people. I think if you have people that are painful to work with, you lose the nice people that you do want to work with,
Yeah.
because they don't want to stick
Yeah.
around and work with assholes and stuff like that, which
Yeah. Yeah.
rightfully so.
100%.
So I think you set culture by fixing culture in some ways, maybe not fixing,
Hmm.
course correcting, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately the employees are such a critical part of building the culture. Like, one person cannot set culture for 100 plus people. Like, I think they can help guide it, but I think it's really hard for one individual to do it.
Yeah. In terms of your biggest strengths as a leader, what would you say has been your biggest strength?
That's a question I should ask my team one day. I think for me, I am very optimistic, I would say,
Mhm.
and I'm a relatively hard worker, I would say. Persistence, I think, is my number one strength. Almost over all
Okay.
else, perhaps, is find a way, persist through. It can be done. Obviously, help the team figure it out, or do it, or whatever it may be. I think persistence is the reason why I've been successful as a leader. Like, there's been a lot of hard things to figure out how to get to where we are today, and there will continue to be a lot of hard things. But I don't have a sense of like, oh, it's too hard. We're going to give up. It's just too difficult. I can't
Yeah.
figure out a way. Like, you can always find a way. And if you don't know, you can find people that will help you figure it out. So I think persistence is probably my strength above all
Yeah. Okay.
else.
And what about in terms of weakness? What was something that you sort of one of your biggest weaknesses that you sort of, and how'd you overcome it?
It's an interesting question. I think it's sometimes hard to reflect on why why have you been successful despite this kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I'm probably seen ironically as an Australian, which I feel is very ironic, as very confident, maybe too confident sometimes, which can potentially be off-putting to certain people. It's like, well, he's so sure of himself kind of thing, right? So it's kind of like
Right.
that ego seeming kind of thing, when in reality, I just love I love what we do. We do such cool stuff and we work with such cool
Yeah.
companies. And I'm so proud of what we built that I think sometimes that can kind of be off-putting to some people. But I actually think that's a strength in most scenarios, because most people see that as like, okay, we have confidence this guy can get stuff done. Like, we believe in this,
Yeah.
But I've seen that definitely at times put people off. Like, I think
Yeah.
certain non-technical people or maybe more business oriented people will kind of see that more threatening than helpful, perhaps in certain
Yeah.
lights. So it's something I've gotten feedback on in the past from, like, okay, I need to figure out how to turn that
Yeah.
down. But what I really do is just have other people talk to them instead of me, and that's worked fantastically as well. So know what
Yeah.
you're
Well,
good
that
at.
makes sense. I mean, you got to be who you are, right? And
Right.
that, like you
Yeah.
say, I think that's probably more a strength than a weakness. But I completely understand how people can take it the wrong way, and it can
Yeah.
play against you. But that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean you should change,
It's
because
the
that
it's the
is
tall
also a
poppy thing.
strength, right?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's the reverse of the tall poppy thing. I think I've somehow been very fortunate to not be laden with that curse from Australia, which is, I think, a very unfortunate situation, because I think a lot of people in Australia do fantastic things, but then Aussies are just too, I don't know, negative sometimes, to be honest. It's very
Yeah.
strange. Now that I've spent so much time internationally, there
Yeah.
are a lot of pros for Aussies, but there's definitely certain negative things that you're like, that's not great. It's just not a great way of thinking or acting. So it's kind of a shame
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
putting people down, legitimately putting people down, that sucks.
Australians typically want you to do okay, but not too well.
That's right. That's
Not
right.
not so well that you make me feel bad. It's,
That's right.
like, do okay. We don't wish you harm, but we don't wish you to
It's
do
like
too well.
it's like you're
That
pretty good,
that
but you're
sort
not as
of
good as you
thinking.
think you are,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas in America, it's very different, right? It's like the bigger the better.
That
Go all the way.
everything is, you're the best in the world, no matter what. No one can beat you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very different. But they don't have as good a humor, which is very upsetting sometimes. You have to be very guarded with sarcasm in America. They're not
Yeah. Right.
huge
Doesn't quite hit
understanders
the
of
mark.
sarcasm and word. Some of them get it, but not all of them. In Australia, it's like an art form we've refined, insulting through the lens of not really trying to insult, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's probably not good either. That's probably a negative quality of Australians, I guess. I enjoy
Yeah.
it. If you understand it, I think you enjoy it. But otherwise, people just think we're rude and mean, probably. So,
Yeah. It just hits the wrong spot sometimes, doesn't it?
the
In
benefit,
terms of, yeah.
the biggest benefit before we move on, I think, of any
Yeah.
Aussie founder working internationally is everyone loves that accent. We get like
Yeah.
free blank check on almost everything because of the accent. It is amazing how much goodwill you get from being a foreigner in America. Like, people
Yeah.
legitimately
Right.
like accents in America. I don't think the same is true in like Australia. Like, I don't think Australians like the American accent and stuff like that. So I don't know, that's a weird
No, it
one, but
probably doesn't work both ways, I don't think. No.
no, and it's easier, honestly, to sell to Americans as an Aussie than it is to go talk to Aussies, because we all sound the same. We also have the same funny accent. Whereas
Yeah.
in America, it's like, oh, this guy's got a unique, and it makes you stand out more too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
and obviously, we're a security company, so I always like to open conversations with, I'm a born convict, so who better to help protect against security
Yeah.
threats, right?
Now, yeah, 100%. Now, speaking of convicts, I did read that you've actually employed some people in the past. Tell me if I'm wrong here. People who have been on the other side of
That's right.
the equation here, criminals.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is generally a useful thing to do if you want to figure out how the other side plays the game, because they don't play
Yeah.
fair, and it's kind of good to know this sort of stuff. So we had a chief criminal officer, so we had a kind of a consultant that came in. We worked with him for about a year and taught us like everything about how criminals make money, how they launder cash, like how does the mechanics of crime work. So
Right.
he went to jail and all kinds of stuff. So he was very legit,
Very good at what he
very
did, kind of.
very non-legit person,
Yeah.
a very legit criminal. But yeah, it's kind of fascinating. He had like a taco stand, didn't exist, but he had it on the books to help, launder money through it, and all these kind of different things that they had to do to pay. Because if you don't pay taxes, you can't spend the money. Like, you can't buy a car with
Yeah.
money that was taxed that you didn't earn. Because guess what?
Yeah.
That's pretty obvious. So you kind of learn how does that work. I think the other thing is it's not glamorous being a criminal. I think some people think like, yeah, it's a pretty glamorous life. Like most of the people that are doing that stuff didn't grow up in good families, and they didn't get
Yeah.
taught the right things. Like it's kind of hard, to be honest, to when you talk about the serious part. I definitely consider that sort of stuff more serious. Is
Yeah. Okay.
the people we go up against, whilst really good at building these companies, the fact that they're kind of doing that instead of having a job at a tech company where they could apply themselves and move the world forward in a positive way, there's typically
Yeah.
reasons for that, I would say. They haven't been diverted off the path of crime at some point in their life, which, we contribute in a small way. We stop people making money doing crime. Hopefully they go do something that's non-criminal. That's the goal. We've also helped convert some people from doing more black hat related attacking stuff to actually working with the companies that we protect, to actually protect those
Yeah.
companies and
Okay.
kind of get more into like a security career path. So
Yeah.
we've been all in between. It's the benefit of being a vendor in this space is we're kind of in the middle of the criminal and the brand we're protecting. We're
Yeah.
not
Okay.
Our interest is just stopping our customers from being attacked. We don't really mind exactly how we achieve that. We're okay with working with the adversary if it means they stop attacking our customers. Obviously, our customers, that's harder generally to do for them for legal reasons and all this kind of stuff. So we've kind of been a arm's length middleman, I'd say, in some of these relationships. So like that stuff we don't really talk about very much, but like that is incredibly fascinating.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Like, and it's not something that you, from my point of view, would ever think of. But that's a really fascinating insight.
And it just seemed like a thing you do. Like when we were talking to these people, we just kind of naturally figured, like, I've never spoken to people like this before in my life. And, I've done it quite a lot. And it wasn't like there was no one that could give you guidance on how to do that. We just kind of figured it out as we went along.
Yeah.
I think as long as everyone's playing fair, uh, these people we typically go up against are very smart and they have great ideas and they're very good engineers typically. So, there's, we had one that we would create. We used a product, Bug Crowd at the time, which is an Aussie company actually as well.
Yep.
Casey, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So we would have a private bounty where we would invite this individual in just to work with them, and we would give them like spec work. Like, here's a project. Like, if we had this new feature, how would you attack it? Like, how would you make money from attacking that? Like, how would you monetize that? Who would you sell that to? So we do like spec work, and we pay out bounties for these kind of things. We paid out quite a lot of money because it was useful in getting them to stop attacking our customer, because they now became kind of a consultant, which was good for us and our customer. But it also let us improve our product because we were learning things that we didn't really know. We were trying to reverse engineer how they were doing this
Yeah.
stuff versus just asking them. It's like, hey, could you write a code exploit of this? Like, how would you go about doing it? So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's almost like a role play, isn't it? In terms of like getting them before you actually go to the. Yeah. You'd rather them do what they're going to do offline or off the real life stuff than attacking the actual customer, right? So it makes complete
that's
sense.
right. Yeah, that's right. And attacks they build for one customer, they might use against other customers of ours, and we don't want it getting leaked and all those kind of things. So it's
Mm.
generally better for us and our other customers to kind of, squash that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, and in terms of the types of people, like the way you're describing some of the engineers and the people there, it sounds sort of almost like it's individual people doing things. My thinking was that it was probably there was a lot more organized crime behind it. What's the actual mix in real life in terms of that sort of thing? Is there a big organized element to it, or is it sort of individual? How does it work?
Yeah, it's mixed. I'd say in the early days it was more individuals. Nowadays it's far more organized because of the complexity of attacking a product like Arkose is just too much now for an individual to do. So we're
Right.
really now more seeing organized crime. Like if anyone wants to attack our customers in any way where they're actually legitimately profiting versus it being like a thing they're just enjoying doing, it requires a lot of resources and a lot of ongoing
Okay.
work. We're obviously every day protecting our customers. We have a 24/7 team monitoring, always taking action. Anytime a threat occurs or an attack occurs, we jump on it straight away. We're really good at that. Like our goal is to stop attacks before they make any money. The sooner we stop them, the better, within minutes or seconds, right? And ideally automatically from the system. So if it's not automated, we have people doing it. Doesn't really matter as long as we stop them ASAP. Because the quicker you stop them, the less profit they make, the less willing they are to keep attacking you. So the goal is stop them as soon
Yeah.
as possible. So that's really hard for like an amateur kind of programmer. You can't really, like, you could have attacked us many years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Not today. That doesn't work anymore.
Okay.
So now the only people left attacking us in earnest are people that are in it to make big money, and they have a lot of resources. So something we've seen in the last 16 months is something we call Cybercrime as a service. So you can now purchase from third-party developers, which build the tools that you can use to attack companies like ours or the customers of ours. They're actually entire engineering teams that you can hire.
Right.
And they're making quite a lot of money. Like they're not just attacking Arkose, they're attacking a number of companies in this space. But these businesses are making millions of dollars a year, basically selling tools to attack. They're not attacking us purposefully. They're attacking all of the kind of brands we work with, right? We're obviously in between, so they have to deal with us as part of it. But that's
So they're the opposite of you guys, basically, right? Is that what you're sort of in some ways?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. They're kind of like the evil twin of our industry, I would say. It's SaaS. Like these are products you buy on a monthly subscription
It's
fee.
crazy, right?
They have warranties, they have SLAs on support. Like they're like legit, non-legit businesses, and none of them are based in the US. They're all based in like Vietnam and China and these harder to prosecute locations, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you kind of have to fight them from a product because you can't really fight them so easily legally.
Has the geopolitical situation in the last sort of couple of years changed the way your industry works and how, as you know, I'm talking about obviously Russia-Ukraine issue and Russia becoming presumably more active. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading more about it. Also, the China-US situation. Has that changed your industry in a big way?
I would say there's been changes. I think just in general attacks, they're just so lucrative that it's always kind of happening.
Right.
Nation states, like I'm sure a lot of it does occur. We protect, like I said, the large consumer businesses, large video game companies. Right. These aren't necessarily getting attacked by nation states. They're not governments.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure those kind of attacks do occur against potentially some of the banks and stuff we work with. But typically, they're trying to penetrate the network to get access to like employee data. We're protecting the consumers. Like China's not interested in getting into, well, they might be. I don't know. I don't work in China. But we're more primarily dealing with financial motivated criminals. They're in it to make money. Okay. And if you stop them making money, they do give up. Where state actors are not really motivated by money. They're motivated by other reasons, of course.
Yeah.
Knowledge or control. We've typically seen adversaries give up, which would lead us to think that they're not state-based. We see very well-funded adversaries, but they typically do give up if the efforts don't return anything.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. I understand that. I'd never really thought about it in that much detail before, but you've really got different types of cyber criminals in different sort of businesses, right?
Yeah, I think actually kind of interestingly enough, it's always kind of an awkward thing to say because it is kind of what it is, but there was a lot of crime occurring from Ukraine prior to the war, not so much nowadays. But it was a country of lower social economic, so it was inclined to have more people go down this route because you can make a lot of money doing this stuff compared to like a living wage in these kind of regions. Russia's always been kind of a more than happy to host illegitimately used business software, I would say. Like if you want to buy a data center of bad ISPs or whatever, pretty easy to get one from Russia and they're not going to prosecute. So, you still see that sort of stuff. That hasn't really changed too much. I would say the infrastructure hasn't shifted too much. We're still seeing similar kind of stuff from a few years back.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. In terms of the advice you've received as a founder over the years, what's the best sort of advice that you can remember somebody giving you in the early days or could be later days?
So this is the thing with advice is I don't think there's been like one pivotal piece of advice. I feel like there's pivotal pieces of advice continuously, but I don't think there's been one thing where like, okay, that's why we're where we are today. I think a lot of it's a journey. It's a very large journey. As you said, it's only been 7-8 years. It's nothing. Trust me, it feels a lot longer than that when you're doing it. Every week feels like a year, never mind 7 years of that, right? So it's definitely a journey.
All relative.
It is relative, that's right. but it's just been incredibly fortuitous to have advisors from very early stages. If anything, I think the biggest gap was not getting more advisors earlier. If I had gotten more
Right.
advisors earlier than I did, I think potentially we could have accelerated things. Didn't really get a sales advisor until like almost 2.5 years in, or 2 years in, or whatever it was. If I had
Yeah.
one of those much earlier, like actually someone that would help me figure out how to take it to market, but not just anyone that would listen to me and answer that question, someone that knew how to do that, right? Like that's the trick. You got
Hmm.
to find domain advisors, I think. It's great to have like the general kind of CEO coach or business kind of coach, but like if you really want to solve core problems, you really got to try and find someone like a. This is the coolest thing about the Bay Area is you can find an advisor for any possible little thing you want. In Australia, it's a
Yeah.
lot harder because a lot fewer companies have been successful there, and
Yeah.
the people that have been are actually typically quite hard to get in touch with. Whereas in the Bay Area, everyone is willing to give their time to entrepreneurs. Like you can ask, like I remember asking some of our early customers, like people I'd never met at these companies. Like one of our early advisors is a gentleman called Matt Tomlinson. He's the chief
Right.
technology officer of Electronic Arts. I'd never even met the guy. He said,
Yeah.
"Oh, well,
Okay.
we're
Wow.
working with a division over here. I'm looking for advisors. Would you be interested in kind of mentoring me?" And he's like, "Sure, tell me more." And like he's been an advisor now for like ages, years, 6 years, right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You'd be surprised. You can ask pretty much anyone for advice, as long as
Yeah.
you're genuine and you listen to that advice. You're probably going to get something from them, and they're probably willing to give you more if you keep asking. If you follow it, if you don't follow it, then they'll be like, "Why am I wasting my time?" Kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. But no, that's really interesting. And in terms of the company, you're talking about the different growth you've had. You've raised money along the way. Um, I'm not sure if I read something along the lines of somewhere around 70 million, and I read along 180 million. I'm not sure which of those are right.
So it's questionable where the data sources come from, but we've raised, I think it was like 130 million US in total.
Right.
Our
Yeah.
last round was 70 million. That was our Series C we did with SoftBank. So that was our last
Yeah.
round in
Okay.
2021. Yeah.
And what was your process as you went through that in terms of determining not just the amount, but also the types of people or types of groups you bring into the company? Because obviously that's a critical part of what you do.
Yeah, and I've been quite deliberate with that through the years as well. It's not just we need to raise money. Anyone willing to give us money, great, you're now an
Yep.
investor. It's being more deliberate. I'd say in the early seed stage, it's more like that because you're trying to just find high net worths,
Yep.
chip in 50K here and there, whoever's going to help 10K, 20K, whatever, you know, especially in Australia where historically it's been harder to raise capital. I think it's a lot more
Yeah.
mature
Yeah.
now than it was back then. But, when I was starting this company, there wasn't really much of a scene for venture capital, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, our first institutional investor, USVP. So the reason why opted to go with them, and they've been a fantastic partner, and obviously still today a fantastic partner, is they had experience in our space. There was another company called ThreatMetrics, which actually started in Australia as well. It's a fraud
Okay.
solution that most people aren't even aware of. It was an Australian founded company. Um, they had just sold that business and for almost a billion AUD, so like 800 something USD,
Yep.
whatever, to big provider and over here. And it was very similar. They started over there, they flipped it to the US, they kind of had the two different locations, they sold in kind of a similar market, kind of similar buyers. Like we don't compete with them, but we sit alongside them with a lot of our customers.
Hmm.
We know the people that would
Yep.
use that product. So there was a good natural synergy with just that investor understanding us very well. So that was very important. They also helped me get Reed Talsig, the CEO of that company, to join our board as well. And he's been
Oh,
fantastic.
okay. Wow.
He's been very close to, he's been a board member for almost 5 years, and he has been another fantastic advisor. So, all those things kind of add up. Our Series B investor was actually Microsoft. So Microsoft was already a customer of ours actually before they invested. One of the few portfolio companies that they had that was already being used by Microsoft. Typically, they invest in companies and are like, "Hey, we'll try and get you into Microsoft." We were in
Yep.
kind of a rare situation where we'd already started working with them, and we knew there was a good strategic fit. Obviously, Microsoft owns a lot of properties that are targets for adversaries. Think of like social media platforms, tech companies,
Yeah.
Azure, all these different kind of things. Like these are all very lucrative things for attackers and adversaries. Um, so we aligned very early on with Microsoft, both as a customer, but then also joining as a strategic investor. that led our B round. And then the head of Microsoft Ventures moved to SoftBank shortly thereafter. And then when he was at SoftBank,
Okay.
invested in us again. So he led the second
Right.
round, the C round. And that was really thanks to the work that he'd seen us do at Microsoft. So we got to keep working with him through that journey.
Well, that just shows you how important some of those personal relationships and business relationships that you make along the way really are, right? When you see something as clear as that, that's
Right.
pretty impressive.
It's we've got a good track record, so I think they're all pretty happy with the work we've done. I know our Aussie seed investors are very, very happy with the work we've done. They've gotten, on paper, very good returns on paper. Some of them have sold some of the equity through these rounds. We let some of the early investors do and that has been very good for them. So I'm very, very proud that the people that helped us kind of get to where we are getting something out of it. That's awesome. Giving back to the Australian. I think we're going to make a lot of very wealthy people in Australia when this is all said and done. So that's great.
Yeah, very good. Now, I normally finish off by going through the final 4 quick rapid fire questions, but you've told me you're not really into books or looking at other business people. You prefer to just get on with the job. So I'm going to skip those questions, Kevin.
I think nothing against that, but I think for where we are as a business, very hands-on running the company today and every day. There's plenty of work to be done, I'd say, around here. And don't focus too much on what other people are doing. Really focus on what are we doing for our customers and what are the adversaries doing to teach us what we should be doing better. Like, we have a very interesting product that's kind of led by the people we're brought in to stop in many ways. So it's kind of fascinating kind of product to build, but we are always learning from them, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's obviously working. So you just keep doing what's working well. My final question would be, what's next for the business? Where's the next 5 and 10 years go for the company?
Yeah, we operate in a number of segments, but we're still pretty early stage in the sense that, you know, we haven't launched major partnerships that are publicly known. We're pretty deep into that process. We've been working on some for over a year, let's say, and they're coming out very soon. So really building the flywheel of proper partner motion, OEM, these kind of things. We have a fantastic product to do that with, but again, we've been kind of too early to kind of focus on doing that. You kind of need to build the business and prove it first, and then you kind of start getting to that stuff. And then really going after some of the industries that we're not that deeply embedded in now. We've got some early customer wins in, you know, I don't want to give away too much. Obviously, our competition's watching everything we do, so it's pretty funny. But some early customer wins in certain verticals, and we're going to go get a lot more of them. I'll tell you that soon thereafter. You know, the next major goal is getting to 100 million in annual recurring revenue. That's basically the next goal for Arkose. And we have a very clear plan on how we're going to execute and do that. And then we figure out the next goal after that. But that's a pretty good focus for now, I'd say.
Perfect. On with the job.
That's right.
Thanks very much, Kevin, for your time. It's been really, really interesting.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.